There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next 24 hours we'll see pressure rise from the south, bringing fine weather for most of us and then leading to a warming trend during the rest of the week. Here's the high pressure. It's been across southern parts of the UK during the week so far, but it's trapped a weather front, and that front has brought an area of cloud and rain south. As that front is squeezed under the area of high pressure, it will tend to fizzle away, cloud becomes patchy, rain peters out, and overnight we're going to see a lot of dry and clear weather, temperatures dipping to 14 or 15 in the south, perhaps the single figures for some sheltered parts in northern UK, and a gusty wind through the night for northern and western Scotland, along with a few showers. Those showers continuing first thing, but really across England and Wales it's dry. It's bright, some areas of cloud lingering in the south. Won't be long before they clear. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bright start as well in the south of Scotland, eastern parts of Northern Ireland. But the cloud is tending to thicken once again from the west, and we'll see some light showers predominantly to the north of the central belt. The gusty wind in northern Scotland will tend to ease gradually through the day, but it is a tale of two halves across the UK. I think a cloudy day for Northern Ireland and Scotland with some light showers around, but for England and Wales, plenty of blue skies and temperatures responding well to the strong June sunshine. We're talking about widely mid-20s, perhaps up to 27 or 28 Celsius in some of the warmer spots in the southeast. Then we start off Thursday with plenty of sunshine once again, but we do have this area of cloud moving north across central and northern Scotland, some outbreaks of showery rain in the far northwest, and that's generally going to drift far enough north to allow sunny skies across the whole of the country later Thursday and into Friday, and that will allow temperatures to rise up to the high 20s and low 30s in places.
There will be a light breeze in the morning, leading to a warm front. Boxed heat pumps, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Imagine having an extra £1,000 to spend each week for an entire year. £54,321 in tax-free cash could be yours. Cash to spend however you like. £54,321 in cash could be landing in your bank account this year. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message, or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost £5 plus one standard network rate message. Go to gbnews.com/win. Entries start at £2.50. Call 0903 686 3232. Calls cost £2.50 plus your network access charge. Or post your name and number to GB14 PO Box 8690 Derby DE1 9TT. UK only. Entrance must be 18 or over. Lines close at 4 p.m. on the 1st of August. Please check the closing time if listening or watching on demand.
From the school run to the home run, watch a new show for all of Britain.
He can say whatever he wants.
A straight talking show where all voices are heard.
And, when are we going to stop talking about smashing the gangs and actually do it?
With the stories that matter from every part of our country.
There's a bit of a crash landing there for your Chancellor.
Bold, fearless and standing up for you. That's me, Martin Daubney, 3 p.m. till 6 p.m, weekdays, here only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I ever got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m, only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here
We do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, good evening. It's me, Jacob Rees-Mogg, on State of the Nation tonight. The government has finally stated the obvious. The Channel crisis is deteriorating rapidly. With the news that migrants are amongst new grooming gang suspects, the matter has become an urgent one of law and order. I'll be asking the Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Sebastian Gorka, how the United States managed to secure its own border amidst our own Channel chaos.
We all know the great Prime Minister of the UK, and we just signed a document. This is... sorry about that.
Meanwhile, just as the UK-US trade deal has been finalised, the government is selling out smoky bacon-flavoured crisps to the European Union. Plus, trampolining and skateboarding migrants paid for by you. I'll be joined by Reform's Doge Chief Zia Youssef about some of the most absurd revelations from Kent County Council. State of the Nation starts now. I'll also be joined by my most intellectual panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Sir John Redwood, and the journalist and broadcaster, Matthew Stadlin. As always, I want to know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. But now, it's your favourite time of the day, the News Bulletin with Katie Barn.
Jacob, thank you and good evening. The top stories at 8:01. A breaking update to begin this hour. MPs have voted to decriminalise abortion in England and Wales in an historic vote in the House of Commons.
The ayes to the right, 379. The noes to the left, 137.
The ayes to the right, 379. The noes to the left, 137. So the ayes have it. The ayes have it. Unlock.
Well, under current law in England and Wales, abortion is allowed up to the first 24 weeks of pregnancy and beyond that in certain circumstances. But now, after Labour MP Tonia Antoniazzi's amendment to the Crime and Policing Bill has passed, the threat of investigation, arrest, prosecution or imprisonment for late-term abortion has been removed. Antoniazzi argued that 1% of abortions that happen after 24 weeks should be decriminalised, saying these were desperate women who need compassion, not criminalisation. The vote passed by 379 to 137, a majority of 242, therefore decriminalising women terminating their own pregnancies. More reaction to this breaking news on GB News throughout the evening. Sir Keir Starmer has said that the National Grooming Gangs inquiry needs to go wherever it needs to go and that there won't be any no-go zones, suggesting that councils, police forces and officials across government could be investigated. Speaking to GB News' political editor Christopher Hope at the G7 summit in Canada, the Prime Minister further clarified comments about those calling for a national inquiry jumping on a far-right bandwagon related specifically to politicians. It comes as the author of that major review into grooming gangs, Baroness Louise Casey, has urged people to keep calm about drawing conclusions from data on the ethnicity of suspects and offenders. Home Secretary Yvette Cooper claimed officials have dodged the issue of ethnicity among the groups of sex offenders for fear of being called racist, even though available data showed suspects were disproportionately likely to be Pakistani men. A record 17,000 small boat migrants have crossed the English Channel so far this year. That figure is the highest on record for this point in any year since the crisis began in 2018. That comes as the Prime Minister said today we need to empty asylum hotels and that the government is looking at a variety of options to tackle the small boats crisis, a situation which they describe as deteriorating. Sir Keir Starmer said that the authorities are looking at measures surrounding visas and returns agreements, as well as closing all asylum hotels by 2029. That comes as French authorities are struggling to cope with a huge surge in serious violence in the migrant camps of northern France, a senior security source has told GB News. And to the Middle East, where throughout this evening, Iran and Israel have been continuing to exchange fire, with missiles warnings for Tel Aviv and Tehran. The Iranian ambassador to the UK said today that the narrative about Iran as an existential threat is false and is used by Israel to justify aggression and hide Israel's war crimes, adding that Iran has no intention to enrich to the level of nuclear bomb. Iranian state media have also said that Israel has launched a massive cyber war against Iran's digital infrastructure. President Trump has written on Truth Social saying we have complete and total control of the skies over Iran, adding that we are not going to kill the Iranian supreme leader and that our patience is wearing thin, urging for the unconditional surrender of Iran. Those are your latest GB News headlines. Now let's go back to Jacob.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to news alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Welcome back to State of the Nation. Before I get on to my monologue, I can't but say a few words about that terrible vote from the House of Commons to allow infanticide of babies in the womb between 24 weeks and natural birth. This is a great tragedy. It means that up to 2,500 babies, on Antonia Antoniazzi's figures, 1%, could be killed in this way. Now the law is on its way to being changed. It is the cult of death that the Labour Party has. It will be seen by so many of them voting to finish people off, the elderly, in a vote later this week. It's one of the great sadnesses of this nation, and it puts us back to ancient Roman times when infanticide was legal. So far today, at least 461 migrants have crossed the Channel. 2,000 have crossed in the last week alone. For this year, it's more than 17,000, which means we're on track for yet another record year of crossings. As we discussed last night, how many times have we heard the government say this?
Also need to clear the ridiculous backlog. We'll cut the asylum backlog.
Bringing down the backlog of asylum claims, we've got to find accommodation. There's a record backlog.
And how many times have we heard them say this?
To go after the criminal gangs, to smash the gang networks.
To smash the smuggling gangs.
Smash the gangs.
To smash the gangs.
Well, the government has changed its tune. Late last night, it made a mighty admission. This was the admission.
Return stability to the economy, and that's why today I can announce that this winter 9 million pensioners will now receive the winter fuel payment.
And even this admission just yesterday.
On the basis of what she's found, she says there should be a national inquiry. I've looked at her report. I've considered that material. I think she's right, and that's why there'll be a national inquiry.
There's an extraordinary admission across these stories about the consistent bungling in policy making. Late last night, in a gloriously fatuous statement of the obvious, a spokesman for His Majesty's government described the situation in the Channel as deteriorating. Sounds a bit like the shipping forecast. As ever, the Labour government is slowest in the class. It should have the dunce's cap on and be put in the corner. Will it do what is necessary to tackle the problem, especially when Baroness Casey's review, that was published yesterday, has exposed the Channel migrant crisis to be a law and order issue too? It feeds through to the grooming rape gangs crisis. Last week, Rachel Reeves's number two, Darren Jones, made this specious remark.
And when you see that the majority of the people in these boats are children, babies and women who have been...
No, they're not.
No, you have got to take... No, look, I get this is...
North of 90% of them are adult men.
Let me be... No.
Well, that was completely false, entirely untrue from a government minister, a minister of the Crown. The overwhelming majority of those crossing are young men, and it's now been confirmed that asylum seekers and foreign nationals are involved in a, quote, significant proportion of live police investigations into rape gangs. There's now an even bigger duty to uphold law and order by securing the border. Sir Keir Starmer knows what needs to be done to tackle the crisis, but he doesn't want to do it. He needs something like the deterrent plan that Rwanda would have been. It means withdrawing from the European Convention and the Refugee Convention. And fundamentally, it means deporting people who arrive here illegally, either to a third country or back home. As ever, let me know your views, mailmog@gbnews.com. I'm very pleased to be joined now by the former Labour MP for Rochdale, Simon Danchuk, as well as my panel, the former Conservative Cabinet Minister, Sir John Redwood, journalist and broadcaster Matthew Stadlen. But Simon, let me come to you first, because you were telling your friends in the Labour Party about this scandal years ago, and nobody wanted to listen.
Yeah, that's exactly right. I was the MP from 2010 to 2017 in Rochdale. The Rochdale grooming scandal broke as a story in 2012. I quickly came out saying that ethnicity and religion were a key factor in the abuse. The perpetrators had a very low opinion of the victims because they were Christian, because they were white, because they were working class perhaps, and they used that as an opportunity to groom them and to rape them. And I made this clear. I was warned off by a couple of significant members of the Labour Party. I was told not to mention the ethnicity or the religion of the perpetrators, but I ignored that and continued to do so.
So you came under pressure from senior figures within the Labour Party not to mention ethnicity. Why were they doing that?
Oh, there's no doubt about it. I mean, the most senior figure was Tony Lloyd, who was chair of the Parliamentary Labour Party at the time. And I wrote to the National Inquiry in 2017 saying that he'd warned me off it, and he was concerned about votes. I mean, that's quite clear. They thought it would upset the voting of Pakistani communities, and they didn't want to lose the vote. I was quite clear about that.
The previous MP for Rochdale, not immediately before you, was Cyril Smith, who was himself a major abuser. So Rochdale has a long history of covering these sorts of things up.
Yeah, that's right. Cyril Smith had abused children. His modus operandi was to become a school governor, so he was a school governor of many schools, and he would abuse children. I outed him as a paedophile in 2012. I wrote the book, Smile for the Camera, The Double Life of Cyril Smith. And in that book, I made the point that because people in the community knew of Cyril Smith being an abuser, it also almost made it acceptable to some people in the community. It sort of normalised it, and I think that, you know, that is a real concern. The good news now is, because of what's gone on since 2010, 2012, is that everybody is quite clear abusing children is totally unacceptable, and that's something that's more commonly talked about now.
It's more talked about, but one of the things that's come out of the report is some of the abuse is coming from people who are here illegally, asylum seekers and illegal immigrants, who, once they've broken one law, they've got much less sanction against them if they break other laws, because they're already in a criminal world.
Yeah, that's right. And because a number of people in authority, the police and in social services, have deliberately ignored or covered up the abuse by these particular perpetrators, I think they feel emboldened. I think Smith was the same. They feel emboldened and continue to commit these types of crimes. There's no doubt about that.
And you made the point of pressure being put on you as a politician, and councillors covered things up. But so did the police and so did social services. Where was the pressure on them coming from?
Oh, yeah, I think there's been a culture of celebrating multiculturalism within institutions, whether that's the police or in local authorities or in national government, in the Home Office. And so, you know, we don't challenge this. And that's what the Casey Review says. It's quite clear that, that the institutions had a perverse view of multiculturalism to the point where they were prepared to cover this up. It's quite incredible, really.
Well, Matthew, let me bring you in, because it does seem as if an attempt to present multiculturalism as being a great success has actually undermined it, because this country's done quite well in racial integration, much better than other countries. Something like this, which was covered up in the hope of making multiculturalism appear universally good, has actually done a lot of harm.
Anyone who is involved in the cover-up of the rape gangs or of child sexual abuse of any nature should be held to account. And as the father of 2 young children, what I'm interested in is the perpetrators of these horrific crimes. And I think the rape gangs are a particularly egregious example of the exploitation, the sexual exploitation of children. Anyone involved in those, I don't care what their ethnicity is, obviously, I want them behind bars, and I'm relieved to see and support the Home Secretary's attempt now to go over prosecutions that didn't actually develop to make sure that all those responsible are indeed finally held to account and face justice. I think she was doing that anyway before this audit was published.
And John, we were in government for 14 years. Why weren't we more aggressive in forcing Labour councils to investigate properly? Why wasn't pressure seeming to come from central government?
Well, I think that's what we've got to find out, and I agree there was a collective failure. I think a lot of us didn't know the scale of this. We had no belief that there could be so much depravity. I mean, if you're just a normal father or mother with normal feelings about protecting children, you find it very difficult to believe anybody could do these sort of things. And if somebody had said to me before it was common knowledge that this is happening in every major city in the country, I think I wouldn't have believed them. It needed the evidence to come out, and it was all being suppressed.
One of my big concerns at the moment is the politicisation of this. I mean, you rightly point out that this inquiry is happening now under a Labour government and didn't happen in this form, although there was a generalised inquiry under Professor Jay into child sexual abuse. But this didn't happen during 14 years of Conservatives in power. But I am, honestly, really much less interested in the politics of it. What I want to do, what I want to be done, is two things. One, bring justice to those who have suffered and haven't yet experienced justice. And that, by the way, involves bringing the perpetrators to justice who haven't yet been brought to justice. And the second thing is, equally important, to protect children now and moving forward. And I will be absolutely clear, as someone coming from the centre-left who sees all sorts of advantages in our multicultural, multiracial society, that every single perpetrator, no matter what their ethnicity or race, needs to be treated equally under the law. And we know this now, but we've known it for some time, where people, because they were afraid of being called racist, because of any sort of sensitivity, let alone because they might have wanted to protect votes or whatever it was that was going on, and this will all be investigated, where they let children down, those people need to be named and shamed.
But if you have councillors and senior officials in these councils denying any of this is going on, they must be definitely disciplined, or action must be taken against them, because they are the reason normal people didn't take this up more aggressively, because we had all these reassurances from the people who were there in safeguarding roles. They were being paid big salaries to look after children, and they were covering it all up, and they must be rooted out.
And especially the police, whose job it is to arrest and prosecute people.
And social services.
And social services,
of course.
Yeah.
But one of the big problems we have now is that under Keir Starmer, illegal immigration via the small boats is up 30% since he came to power. Louise Casey's review makes it clear that a disproportionate number of those in grooming gangs are foreign nationals. So we're actually importing even more
Be a bit careful on that. Be a bit careful. As she said on Newsnight last night, she rather backtracked and said this is a small number of cases. We've got to be careful not to weaponise it at the same time as making sure that anyone, despite whatever their ethnicity, is held to account.
Matthew, I'm going to disagree with you for once. I think without weaponising it, nothing actually happened. And that's why there's got to be adversarial politics about it to make things happen. Anyway, thank you, Simon, to my panel. In a moment, we'll be going live to the White House. Not one of Donald Trump's normal interviews for this programme, but to speak to Dr. Sebastian Gorka about how the United States managed to secure its own border amidst our channel chaos.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
A lot of people have been imbibed with the notion you're born white, you're born male, you've won life's lottery, but that's not what people are telling you. Tell us, what began your journey on this fascinating path?
I mean, I think rather like you, I've had a long interest in men and mental health. And I was talking to companies about men's mental health, and at the end, there'd always be guys who come up to me and say, I can't say this out loud, but my career has taken a real hit because I'm a man. I don't know what to do with that. You know, things had to change. I'm not sexist, I'm not racist, but I'm really suffering. So I heard that so many times. I thought I need to investigate this, gauge how wide this is, and did some polling, spoke to a lot of people, and I was really staggered by what we got back. For nearly half of all white guys to be walking around too scared to even give respectful feedback to a colleague, to not risk making a joke, to, a third have said that their mental health has been affected because there's that terrible fear that doing or saying the wrong thing and you're out the door.
Gets you cancelled.
Yeah, and then, particularly from young guys, more than 1 in 3 young guys saying that they've directly lost out on career opportunities, promotions, because they're white men. It was a scale I didn't expect. And, as I said, no one's saying this didn't have to change. In my old BBC days, I've worked undercover to expose racism. But the DEI, the diversity programs that have been rolled out, aren't just nice HR policies. They're actually rooted in an early 70s radical Marxism that divides everyone into oppressed and oppressor. And if you're white and male, you're an oppressor. Doesn't matter if you're working class, doesn't matter what your mental health's like. You're already seen as top of the pack. And as we know, it's a massive distortion of what it's like for most guys.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news,
please bring us up to date.
Or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, welcome back. I'm still Jacob Rees-Mogg, and as you remember, before the messages from our sponsors, we were discussing the UK's broken borders and how to secure them. And if there's one government in the world that has shown that borders can be closed, it's the Trump administration. Indeed, in April this year, the southern border apprehensions plunged more than 90% from the year before. So I can think of no better man to ask about this than the US Director of Counterterrorism and Deputy Assistant to President Trump, Dr. Sebastian Gorka. Dr. Gorka, welcome back to GB News. This is an amazing success in April, 90% reduction in people crossing the border illegally. How has this been achieved?
Very simply, a president who had already served 4 years in office, who knew how to seal the border, made a promise during the election campaign, and he kept his promise. President Trump has told the world it's America first, not America alone, and as such, we believe in national sovereignty, Jacob. The Westphalian nation-state system is an important one, and if you don't have borders, you do not exist as a country. And he has released the toughest people out there, whether it's our real border czar, Tom Homan, a friend of mine who's straight out of Central Casting, whether it's Governor Noem as the Secretary of Homeland Security, Stephen Miller, my colleague here in the White House, who's the Homeland Security advisor, and we've just hermetically sealed the border. We've deported 250,000 illegals who we've hunted down, the worst of the worst, organized crime members, members of cartels and gangs. And then the most interesting thing of all that, of course, the mainstream lying legacy media will never tell you, Jacob, this 250,000 is the people we physically removed, but we've also seen 1 million illegals self-deport. Why? Because the president has sent a very simple message: leave now and have the chance of coming back legally one day, or if we find you now on American soil here as an illegal, you will be deported and you will never, ever get to come back. So it's simply a function of promises kept by President Donald J. Trump.
So it's a mixture of deterrence and enforcement, but you have a constitution, you have a particularly litigious national culture. There's a lot of activity going on in the courts. We've had that problem in the UK, and it gummed up everything we tried to do. Why aren't the courts managing to stop this? Because there's certainly some cases where they've been trying.
Oh, desperately. I mean, we have seen lawfare deployed against the president when he was a candidate. Remember, he was facing 700 years in prison on spurious fake charges because they didn't want the American people to have the right to choose him once again as their commander-in-chief. And he's experiencing now, as the chief executive, by the leftists who, look, lost the election. 77 million Americans chose President Trump once more as their president. So what have they got left? Just lawfare in the courts with judges who think they are also the executive. But God bless the Supreme Court. We have a conservative majority that believes in the U.S. Constitution. We're getting emergency hearings. And in almost every instance, these absolutely spurious and frivolous cases are being struck down by the highest court of the land.
And how much is it costing? Because one of the other things Donald Trump wants to do with DOGE is cut government expenditure. But I imagine a lot of US dollars are going into these deportations and securing the border.
Yes, it's not cheap, but we're leveraging every asset possible. Thanks to Pete Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense, we're using military flights often to get the worst of the worst cartel criminals out of the country. But as Tom Homan, in an incredibly viral interview, I think with the fake news CNN, said just last week, so how much is national security worth it to you? Remember, we have seen an absolute spate, well, worse than even the rape gangs you discussed in the prior segment. Here in America, we've seen 12-year-old girls raped and then murdered and thrown into a ditch. This is the Jocelyn Nungares of the world. This is Rachel Marin, the mother of 5 from Maryland, not far from where I'm sitting. Likewise, went out for a jog, raped by an illegal, strangled, and then thrown into a bush. This is how much is the safety of our women and children worth it to the average American patriot and taxpayer? I think you can't put a price tag on that. So until every last illegal is removed, which, by the way, Jacob, more than 70% of polled Americans agree with that, we will not be safe.
And what about El Salvador and the people who are being sent off there? Because we had the proposal for Rwanda, which the lefty sentimentalists didn't like at all. But compared to that, El Salvador's pretty tough.
Yeah, and we are very blessed with not only those nations who likewise have representative heads of state accepting back the criminals who are here illegally. I won't mention any names, but I had an ambassador come up to me at the incredible 250 birthday celebrations for the U.S. Army just this Saturday, who said, we're very glad to be able to accept foreign nationals, illegals being deported from America to our country as a contribution to the safety of America. So, look, you know as well as anyone, he literally wrote the book, The Art of the Deal. There is no deal maker like President Trump. So even the recalcitrant heads of state in our hemisphere know when it's time to cooperate with the arch deal maker.
And how are the Liberals responding? Because you've obviously had some trouble in California, sent in the National Guard. Is that a worry? Do you think there's much popular support for that? You mentioned the 70% in favour of the deportations.
It's just those, and I came to this realization a couple of years ago when I had my own national TV show, that it's not politics as usual anymore. The old taxonomy of conservative, vice liberal, or left and right really does not apply anymore. There's one liminal division. There's one thing that separates Americans today, and it's whether they love the country or whether you hate it. And we do have a race problem in America. It's mostly white liberal women who have some kind of internalized self-hatred that they project onto others. Why else would you say you don't need borders? Why else would you plead the case of a MS-13 illegal who we know was trafficking human beings into the country, and when he gets deported, you're up in arms? Why exactly? Because you just hate your own country. It's that easy, Jacob.
Well, Dr. Corker, thank you for joining me. As I love my own country, I'm not sure I'm with you on celebrating the 250th anniversary of the US Army. I think that came about in most unsatisfactory circumstances. But thank you very much. In a moment, we are going to be talking about the UK-US trade deal, which is signed.
Dinner under the stars tonight?
That reminds me of our travel insurance.
You mean all clear skies?
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Whilst there will be a lot of fine and sunny weather around parts of southern Europe, we also need to look at how hot it's going to be. A fair few showery bursts perhaps are affecting parts of Madeira towards the Canary Islands, and then across Spain and France. We're really seeing the heat building as we go through this week. It is going to be heatwave conditions for some here. A bit more showery rain affecting Italy as we go through Wednesday, and further east some showery bursts are possible, but through the outlook really it looks largely dry and sunny for most.
All Clear Travel Insurance sponsors GB News travel destinations forecast.
Hi there, and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next 24 hours, we'll see pressure rise from the south, bringing fine weather for most of us, and then leading to a warming trend during the rest of the week. Here's the high pressure. It's been across southern parts of the UK during the week so far, but it's trapped a weather front, and that front has brought an area of cloud and rain south. As that front is squeezed under the area of high pressure, it will tend to fizzle away, cloud becomes patchy, rain peters out, and overnight we're going to see a lot of dry and clear weather, temperatures dipping to 14 or 15 in the south, perhaps the single figures for some sheltered parts in northern UK, and a gusty wind through the night for northern and western Scotland, along with a few showers. Those showers continuing first thing, but really across England and Wales it's dry, it's bright, some areas of cloud lingering in the south. Won't be long before they clear. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bright start as well in the south of Scotland, eastern parts of Northern Ireland. But the cloud is tending to thicken once again from the west, and we'll see some light showers predominantly to the north of the central belt. The gusty wind in northern Scotland will tend to ease gradually through the day, but it is a tale of two halves across the UK. I think a cloudy day for Northern Ireland and Scotland with some light showers around, but for England and Wales, plenty of blue skies and temperatures responding well to the strong June sunshine. We're talking about widely mid-20s, perhaps up to 27 or 28 Celsius in some of the warmer spots in the southeast. Then we start off Thursday with plenty of sunshine once again, but we do have this area of cloud moving north across central and northern Scotland, some outbreaks of showery rain in the far northwest. That's generally going to drift far enough north to allow sunny skies across the whole of the country later Thursday and into Friday, and that will allow temperatures to rise up to the high 20s and low 30s in places.
Mornings don't have to be tiresome, especially if you have the right company.
Wake up to news as it happens, opinion and debate, and of course, a little bit of entertainment too.
Because when the kettle's on, we're on.
That's Breakfast on GB News, a show worth waking up for.
Every morning from 6 a.m.
Only on the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We'll spread the news, you spread the word.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here's a reminder of the moment from late last night that perhaps best sums up Sir Keir Starmer's first year in charge.
We just signed a document. This is... Sorry about that.
Thank you very much. This now implements on car tariffs and aerospace, our really important agreement. And so this is a very good day for both of our countries.
Well, half of me admires Starmer for having good manners to pick up the papers, and the other half of me thinks that the British Prime Minister looks pretty undignified on all fours in front of the American President. Anyway, the Reverend Starmer and President Donald Trump announced the finalisation of the US-UK trade deal, the great Brexit dividend that has allowed us to avoid the sort of tariffs the EU is facing. But just as this was announced, the Prime Minister's Europhilia struck again, owing to our dynamic alignment recently agreed. Smoky bacon flavour crisps, which I think are disgusting anyway, are set to disappear from shelves because the EU doesn't like them. But if you think it ends with smoky bacon flavour, think again. Well, I'm joined now by the director of the Margaret Thatcher Centre for Freedom at the Heritage Foundation, Niall Gardner. Now, thank you very much for joining me. It's obviously good news that there is a free trade deal with the United States. But actually, if we dynamically align with the EU, we're going to end up in the same position as the EU, aren't we? Because we will have the same discriminatory regime that will make it harder for the US to export to us.
Jacob, thanks very much for having me on the show today. And as you point out, of course, Keir Starmer, while doing this deal with the United States, which I think is a good deal for both sides, and hopefully will lead to a full and comprehensive trade agreement that eliminates all tariffs between the US and the UK. At the same time, of course, Keir Starmer is bowing down to the European Union. He's kowtowing to Brussels with his recent deal with the European Commission, which is a disastrous deal. And I do think that what Keir Starmer is doing here, trying to have a sort of balancing act between Europe and the United States, is not going to work at all. And already alarm bells are ringing here in Washington with regard to Keir Starmer's overall approach. And Starmer is a very unpopular figure among US conservatives who really view him in many ways as a sort of political clown. And Starmer's deferential approach towards Brussels, I think, would threaten the future of a comprehensive trade deal with the United States. So it's a very destructive approach that Starmer is taking. It's very foolish here. And of course, Starmer and his acolytes are, traditionally anti-Brexit people. So Donald Trump is a far bigger backer of Brexit than the British Prime Minister.
And in terms of tariffs, what Trump wants is broad free trade, though with a caveat that he might want to get some revenue from it. Is that right?
Yeah, I think that's correct, actually. And the US especially would like to see the removal of all UK restrictions on US beef going into the UK. Also, the removal of the digital services tax, which is very unpopular here in the United States. But I do think that President Trump would like to see ultimately a zero tariff arrangement between London and Washington. That should be the end result, and I think that would be very good for genuine free trade across the Atlantic.
And Trump has some other tricks up his sleeve, doesn't he? He's threatened a withholding tax on interest payments on US Treasuries in return for the digital services tax. That would be a big cost directly to HM government, among others.
Yes, I mean, as you point out, I mean, the US is, of course, willing to retaliate if Britain's socialist government does not lift the various barriers in place and does not get rid of the digital services tax, which is really a tax on US companies. It's very anti-free market. And I think generally, Keir Starmer is viewed with a great deal of suspicion here in Washington. I think President Trump has been very generous, actually, towards Starmer. And I think the recent trade agreement is an example of that. But under the surface, I think there is a lot of suspicion of Starmer's socialist government, which has been very destructive in many respects.
All right. Well, Niall, thank you very much for joining me this evening. With me now is Gareth Stace, the Director General of UK Steel, as well as my most intellectual panel, Sir John Redwood and Matthew Stadlen. Gareth, thank you for coming in. This isn't yet good news for steel, but we're hoping that we will get there.
Yes, the details of that deal are still being thrashed out between the UK government and the US administration. We hope that the deal will be signed by the end of this month that will enable us tariff-free access to the US, which is our second biggest market by value after the EU. So we really need that deal to be struck, and every day counts in terms of, are we going to ship the steel across the Atlantic to America, or do we have to wait until the deal is finalised?
Because the one thing you want to make sure doesn't happen is that the steel is halfway across the Atlantic and the price of it goes up, potentially by quite a significant amount, before it's delivered.
Yeah, no buyer of steel in the US wants to be that last buyer that pays the tariff when the next day the new buyer doesn't pay any tariff and saves an awful lot of money.
And the steel we export to the US is highly specialised steel, is that correct?
I mean, it's all sorts, but yes, by and large, it's the more expensive, the more profitable steel, and therefore, a really key market for us.
And part of making sure that we have a functioning steel industry in this country, but you're also worried that US tariffs on other countries will divert steel to us that will effectively be dumped in the UK. How do we deal with that? What would be your proposal?
Yeah, and this would be just as big an impact of paying 50% tariffs for us. The steel that needs to go to an open market, we're a very open market. And so what do we want government to do? We want government to ensure that our trade defences are as robust as possible. The Trade Remedies Authority at the moment, the government agency, is looking at how they can tighten that. But there's more that our government can do. What are they going to do after steel safeguards, which also puts up a barrier? They end in a few months' time. So it needs government to ensure that it's not just the direct impact, it's the indirect impact of that flood of steel, as you said, being dumped on our market.
And with a steel industry that is now nationalised, the cost of any difficulties falling directly on taxpayer.
Partly nationalised.
Partly nationalised.
Yes.
It's unclear what the yes.
Yeah, we have 6 steel producers in the UK, you know, many...
But British Steel.
But absolutely, you know, if the government is taking a stake in the UK sector, but then leaves us uncompetitive with high and uncompetitive energy prices, then it's just shooting itself in the foot.
As you know, I agree with you on energy prices. Let me bring my panel in. John, actually, Starmer's done quite well in terms of his negotiation with Donald Trump, better than other countries have done. We should be quite pleased by that.
Well, I don't agree with that anymore. I mean, I think, like his EU reset, he's a very bad negotiator. He promised us he'd got a deal which covered steel and aluminium, and in return, he'd made big concessions on ethanol and beef, which is going to affect our industries. And now we've had a revision to that deal because it was never written down and recorded in a formal agreement, where the steel and aluminium is by no means settled. And America has a whole list of issues with our steel, that we may import too much, that we have Chinese ownership, that we subsidise it too much. And they can use any one or more of those to say they're not going to give such an advantageous deal because they've got their ethanol and they've got their beef part of the deal. Meanwhile, the EU reset deal, which isn't a deal at all, it was a set of unilateral concessions leading to talks. We've already given away the idea of sticking our taxes on energy up even higher by aligning our carbon taxes with Europe, which would be another kiss of death to our steel industry.
Matthew, dynamic alignment is a really stupid idea, isn't it? I mean, I don't care about smoky bacon crisps. I don't like them. I only like, for the record, ready salted. But that this is just the sort of regulation that people really hated the EU for. And to bring that back, to allow that to become a political issue, is such bad politics by Starmer.
Well, that sort of headline brings back bad memories, doesn't it?
It's why people voted to leave. It was a big motivation for people voting to leave.
I mean, the headline is emerging in the Telegraph, which, of course, was very heavily on the side of leave. So to my mind, like you, I don't really care about smoky bacon crisps, don't particularly like them. Had a packet on the weekend, but they're not my favourite. To my mind, this is the Telegraph stirring the pot. This is clickbait. What matters far more is the gentleman sitting over there on your right and what happens to the British steel industry, just as one major example. And to my mind, I don't know whether you agree with this, but this government has done something to defend our steel interests.
But the free trade deal with America will not work if we make importing stuff from the US harder.
But it's been signed.
And dynamic alignment. But there's so much more to do.
I mean, the chap who you interviewed earlier, Niall Gardner, who seemed to be quite intent on trashing the British Prime Minister while sitting in Washington and calling him a socialist. I don't think any...
Well, he is a socialist.
I think genuine socialists...
I think he calls himself a socialist.
But I think genuine socialists would struggle with the idea of calling Keir Starmer a socialist. But he himself said it was a good deal that had been signed. Of course, if it emerges in the coming years that deal is somehow self-sabotage, then that's absolutely a legitimate conversation to be had.
There's nothing in it for steel, and our steel is going to be even less competitive with the stupid EU giveaway.
Gareth, let me give you the last word. Do you think ultimately it will be OK for British Steel, or are you still very concerned?
For British Steel, the company?
No, for British Steel, generically.
In general, us competing, I think it's very difficult. We only produce 4 million tonnes of steel. We used to produce 24 million tonnes of steel. Imports are 70% of UK steel demand. It's an unsustainable position, and that's why we need this government to deliver in the autumn a very successful, bold steel strategy.
And cheap energy.
Yes.
Yeah, brilliant. Well, thank you very much to Gareth and to my panel. In a moment, I'll be speaking to the head of Reform's Doge project, Zia Youssef, about the shocking revelations to come out of Kent Council's wasteful spending.
Westminster's full of talk, but out here, it's the real world.
Am I allowed to talk now?
No, that's it. This is where it matters, real people and real lives. That's what politics is all about.
In fact, has Trump made a good start? No.
Straight answers, no spin, and just a couple of pints.
How many fingers have I got up?
About 10. So join me for Lee Anderson's Real World every Friday at 7 p.m. only on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
You want to know what's really going on in the corridors of power? Labour don't know what to do with you half the time, and that makes you quite lethal in the chamber. Get behind the headlines with Chopper's Political Podcast. Join me, Christopher Hope, as I sit down with the great and the good of British politics. We'll see where this ruling takes us. These are the stories shaping our nation. Chopper's Political Podcast, available now on all platforms. Listen in and stay ahead.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and my show is your opportunity to cut through all the noise and dive in headfirst to some robust debates. Ideas clash.
Situation,
No,
Because the failure is...
You're deliberately avoiding my point. Nothing's held back.
And if you think this is the end of it, wait for more.
And we do not shy away from the difficult stuff. Sometimes I want to shake people and say, if only you understood. So join me on Jubes & Co. weeknights at 6 p.m. only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
What is the state of our economy? What is the state of our National Health Service? What is the state of our schools?
What on earth is going on?
Understanding Britain means understanding the state we are in. This is State of the Nation with me, Matt Goodwin, Wednesdays, Thursdays and Fridays from 8 p.m. on GB News.
5 hosts, 5 opinions, 5 fearless debates,
5 unfiltered takes on the day's news.
5 reasons not to be anywhere else on Saturday night.
This is the Saturday 5. You got me. You got me good there. Britain's biggest Saturday night TV show.
It's not a bad brand.
Yeah. Uncensored.
Very, very racy tonight.
On the unpredictable.
What does she say? Can you translate it for us?
And always entertaining.
And how can a country go from being led by William Wallace Saturday nights from 6 p.m. only on GB News, the People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
You're going to want to stay tuned, trust me.
Welcome back. Reform UK's Doge has made some shocking revelations.
Do you think your taxpayers' money should be spent taking asylum seekers trampolining? How about skateboarding? Well, that's what Kent County Council has been up to. They've also been doing trips to the cinema, trips bowling, and crazy golf, all out of the asylum budget. They've also been spending your money on outrageous things like luxury hair extensions. At Reform, we speak to so many of you who tell us you can't afford to take your family out on trips.
Well, I'm joined now by the man himself, the head of Doge for Reform, Zia Youssef. Zia, what a pleasure to have you back on the programme. This is absolutely extraordinary. Who directly is paying for this? Is it coming out of the Kent County Council council tax, or is it money from a special government pot that they've got to spend on refugees?
Well, that part is still unclear, that latter part, but Jacob, regardless of what the technical answer to that is, British people are constantly being told that their taxes have to keep going up and that councils are bankrupt and there's no ability to save any money anywhere. And many voters, as I said in the video, tell us that they're either working 2 jobs or they can simply ill afford to take their kids and their families bowling or trampolining or to the cinema or skateboarding. So there's nothing about it that's remotely acceptable. And what's interesting is there's been a lot of invective on social media from sort of left-wing types who are just saying it's not possible, literally just saying it's not possible. And I'm telling you, not only is it possible, it's coming out of, it's being booked on these statements under asylum. Then we're being told, well, Kent County Council says that there isn't, quote, an asylum budget. Well, then why on earth are we looking at statements that literally have the word asylum on it? I want to say one other thing, because people are saying, well, It must just be children being taken on, as if that would be okay. No, we're seeing statements in which it is being booked explicitly, in some cases, to 18 plus. And we also published some research and some of our findings with regards to TV licenses. How many people in this country, especially we hear stories from elderly people who have paid into the system their whole lives, being persecuted and prosecuted for non-payment of the TV license? And I'm sure me and you, Jacob, will have our own views about that, like many GB News viewers. So why is it that tens of thousands of pounds, at least in Kent County Council alone, is being spent on paying for TV licenses for asylum seekers? The social fabric and the social contract in this country, Jacob, is hanging by a thread. I want to say one other thing. As extraordinary as what we've already disclosed is, it's simply the tip of the iceberg.
Well, that's the key thing, because am I right in thinking you are going through line by line the expenditure of Kent County Council, and you are going to highlight anything that comes up? Some of them will be quite small, but in aggregate, they could be a very significant part of Kent County Council's expenditure.
Yeah, I would look at the approach as being in two separate ways, right? So the first part, it might be similar to the MP's expenses scandal, frankly, where obviously as a percentage of a £1 trillion national budget, you could argue it's not large amounts, but you remember how angry people were about the fact that people were spending, everybody remembers, you know, moats and bridges being expensed, and obviously we're furious about that. And I think, again, it cuts really into the bone when you talk to voters. They are so angry at politicians for basically taking them for mugs. But on the flip side, in terms of how do we save tens of millions of pounds ultimately across these budgets, that is a more medium and long-term approach that we're taking. We're bringing some of the brightest and best, Jacob, in the country, PhDs from some of our best universities, working pro bono to tackle things like, you know, how do we get the SEND budget down by, for example, you know, I've seen contracts, taxi contracts, worth millions of pounds, one for £3.2 million, where there was only one bidder for it. That's for, you know, these taking SEND kids to school. So many of these contracts are just being basically handed away with one bidder. How on earth? I mean, I put it to you, if you're getting a taxi to the airport, people watching this program, you probably get more than one quote, wouldn't you? But that doesn't happen for the most part with taxpayer money. So we've got to make fundamental changes. And look, you probably know this from your time as a government minister. It is obviously true that some of the procurement mechanisms are broken as a result of statutory laws from Westminster. That is true, and we'll fight those battles. But we have to bring cutting-edge tech. We're going to bring brilliant people into these budgets to look to cut waste. But we're going to start with the most egregious aspects of it. And as I said, what we've just revealed is the tip of the iceberg. If that makes your blood boil, then watch out for what's coming over the coming days.
It does. I think make all the viewers here blood boil. How good is the information you have? Does County Council know how many people it employs? Does it know line by line where it is spending money?
No, you'd be amazed, frankly, how... look, we've obviously started in Kent because we've already visited there. We're going to do this across not all the 10 reform councils, but I can tell you my inbox is full. Our inbox is full of whistleblowers coming forward because they feel like finally there's a vehicle with some political teeth, Jacob, that can actually shine a light on a lot of these issues. But you're absolutely right. Let's take Kent County Council, for example. 9,000 employees. According to the CEO, 3,000 of them are, quote, hybrid, even though their contract, according to her, doesn't allow them to technically work from home. Of those 3,000, they're not actively monitoring how frequently they come to the office, and they say that there is monitoring software on those laptops, on the council laptops that they're using, but they're not actively monitoring it. And our demands to the Doge team on behalf of the councillors asking for that information have not yet received it. Those 3,000 employees, we think, earn roughly about £100 million at the taxpayers' expense each year. I think taxpayers, many of whom cannot work from home, have every right to know whether those people are actually doing work. Don't you think, Jacob?
Well, you know my views on that. I think people should go into work. Is this the great test for reform? Because if you can run councils and you can save money, is that your way of showing that you could govern the country?
I think it's a way, yes. And I think it's a pretty low bar, frankly, given the way many of these councils have been mismanaged. I want to be clear. We're clear-eyed about the fact that there are enormous pressures on council budgets. Much of it is statutory. That doesn't mean there's nothing to be saved in those budgets, but a lot of it is social care, a lot of it is statutory. But that does not mean there aren't ways in which significant money can be saved. And I think there's a cultural
Brilliant.
issue.
Sadly, I'm going to have to cut you off there because it's the end of the programme, but it's great to have you on and good to see you back at Reform. We've contacted Kent County Council for comment, but apparently we haven't got much comment from them. Next, it's the one and only Patrick Christys to tell us that the sun is shining in Somerset and other breaking news.
Yes, indeed. Thank you very much, Jacob. Great show. Well, we here at GB News have infiltrated yet another human smuggling gang. We reported the last two to the authorities. Have they nicked any of them? It doesn't seem so. So we decided to do it again. 1,000 mostly men came over on Friday last week. Now they've started shooting each other in Calais, and it was revealed yesterday that some of the grooming gang people are believed to be illegal immigrants. We're going to keep exposing this. Stay tuned after your weather.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Hi there and welcome to the latest update from the Met Office for GB News. Over the next 24 hours we'll see pressure rise from the south, bringing fine weather for most of us and then leading to a warming trend during the rest of the week. Here's the high pressure. It's been across southern parts of the UK during the week so far, but it's trapped a weather front, and that front has brought an area of cloud and rain south. As that front is squeezed under the area of high pressure, it will tend to fizzle away, cloud becomes patchy, rain peters out, and overnight we're going to see a lot of dry and clear weather, temperatures dipping to 14 or 15 in the south, perhaps the single figures for some sheltered parts in northern UK, and a gusty wind through the night for northern and western Scotland, along with a few showers. Those showers continuing first thing, but really across England and Wales it's dry. It's bright, some areas of cloud lingering in the south. Won't be long before they clear. And then for Scotland and Northern Ireland, a bright start as well in the south of Scotland, eastern parts of Northern Ireland. But the cloud is tending to thicken once again from the west, and we'll see some light showers, predominantly to the north of the central belt. The gusty wind in northern Scotland will tend to ease gradually through the day, but it is a tale of two halves across the UK. I think a cloudy day for Northern Ireland and Scotland with some light showers around, but for England and Wales, plenty of blue skies and temperatures responding well to the strong June sunshine. We're talking about widely mid-20s, perhaps up to 27 or 28 Celsius in some of the warmer spots in the southeast. Then we start off Thursday with plenty of sunshine once again, but we do have this area of cloud moving north across central and northern Scotland, some outbreaks of showery rain in the far northwest, and that's generally going to drift far enough north to allow sunny skies across the whole of the country later Thursday and into Friday, and that will allow temperatures to rise up to the high 20s and low 30s in places.
A positive outlook through the night will power through to a bright day ahead. Boxed Home Battery Storage, sponsors of weather on GB News.
£54,321 cash could be yours. Cash that you could spend however you like. It's like having an extra £1,000 each week for a whole year to play with. Someone is guaranteed to win this amazing amount of cash. So make sure that someone could be you. For another chance to win £54,321 cash, text cash to 63225. One entry costs £2.50 plus one standard network rate message. Or text bonus to 63225. 5 entries cost